Okay. So, good morning. This has been quite a week, and we have a lot to talk about. I'm going to take comments, but before I go to the comments, uh, let me go over something in kind of a monologish kind of fashion. And I want to talk about a little bit about American politics briefly, if you're interested. I'm not going to belabor this. I'm just going to say, and I haven't, I don't even know the full extent of things because last night we had the Trump indictment and I was watching a movie with my wife. So I find that it's really good to decompress and get away from things periodically. And I wasn't going to spoil that. And because I don't know a lot about it, it's almost a good thing the way I want to approach it. So John Rawls, the philosopher, has a concept of talking from of seeing things from behind a veil of ignorance, and what he means by that. And I don't generally like Rawls. I mean, he's not my philosopher. He's not my cup of tea. But it's a good theory to kind of think about: is this fair? And I think we should apply that to politics quite a bit. Like when you hear that a particular politician X did this, because he's politician X, you tend to think, well, that's good or that's bad, rather than think about the X, right? So let's apply this here to what's going on, and then we'll tie it to Ukraine. I promise we'll tie it to Ukraine. So I don't know the facts about the indictment. I do know that I read the first one and it seemed like much ado about nothing. It seemed like it was something that was going to inflate things, but this could be very different. It doesn't matter. What does matter is that what's the effect that it could have. And it doesn't matter if it's my guy or your guy. That's not the point. But here, um, if it is a legitimate thing and it takes down a legitimate person for doing legitimate issue, like he did something wrong and we can clearly document that, that's fine. Do that. Now, the problem is in Trump's case, if you deal with Trump with a standard that you're not meeting out to Biden or Hillary Clinton, and I know only enough about the facts to say what Trump did, let's say he did it. I mean, like the had the documents out or wasn't taking care of them properly or lied about signing off or whatever it was that he was doing. Um, let's say he did it. If you don't apply the same standard to Hillary Clinton, who wiped the server, and we all know that, right? And she doesn't get indicted in the same sweep of things, then you have just made the entire right side of the spectrum pro-Trump and against you. And will want to vote him in only because of the injustice that they perceive, rightly or wrongly. Um, so that's a problem. The bigger problem, though, is that let's expand the lens a little bit. Um, the bigger problem is that we have on the other side Biden in the same day and his son with Burisma and the deal. They were talking about this in Congress. Let's say that there was something there, and let's not even worry about whether it was Biden. If there was something there and they're not dealing with that particular topic, and I'm not saying that there is, I don't know, they're trying to uncover whatever, it would look like a cover up about his son or about Ukraine, and that could lead people to get away from like people on the other side to have even more evidence to say, see, that's all corrupt over there. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't know what happened in either circumstance, but I don't want it to backfire and hit Ukraine. Um, so somebody just popped up here and said Trump is clearly getting the Navalny treatment. Does the left really care about Ukraine, or are they just covering up Burisma's bribes? That's so. What that person just said is exactly the way that it will be perceived, rightly or wrongly. That's the way it will be perceived if they don't do it. If they only approach Trump with the indictment and don't approach Hillary and Biden, like Biden had papers out and scattered and not contained like they were supposed to be as well. If they're not doing it across the board. Now, this leads even to a bigger picture. Let's get away from Trump and Biden. One of the reasons that we hate politicians so much is because politicians tend to not play by the rules, but what they do is they change the rules. Like part of being a lawmaker is you get to change the rules. And but they think in these terms, and think about all the politicians that have gotten rich by going into politics. Like something's wrong about that. Like if you go into politics as a normal person and you come out a multimillionaire, um like you weren't getting paid that much to become a multimillionaire. And so there is a potential for significant corruption that is taking place that, like, yeah, you just want to be okay. So the behind this veil of ignorance, we're looking at it and going, we really hate politicians because they think that they're above the rules. Like I have to play by the rules. And we see the same thing in Ukraine, right? Think about in the injustice of the Russian dissident getting 3 years in jail for protesting the war by calling it a war as opposed to a special military operation and whatever else he might have said, while Russian citizens are in Ukraine raping and maiming and killing and whatever else, and with impunity. Like there's just this crazy double standard of injustice, and we see that in our politicians, and we don't like that we see that in our politicians. And so that's why politicians have such a bad rap. They're not respected the same way that they are. I don't know all the facts of what was going on in either Trump's case or what was going on in the case with Biden with Burisma. And so I can't really speak to it. I can't say, well, this is clearly what's happened. But I will say we absolutely hate the double standard. Um, this person that said this thing about Trump. Now that's really interesting, and I'm about to change and go to your questions. The same person that said the thing about Trump just said, "I'll be clear. I want Ukraine to win and win big. I'm partially Polish." Yeah, and so now here's the interesting thing. So this is the person that raised Burisma and the bribe. So let's talk about that, and then I'll answer any questions that you might have. Burisma. So if there was some bribery between Burisma, a Ukrainian gas company, I believe. It's some kind of gas mineral, something along those lines, and Hunter Biden, and some kind of payoff, and to pay for access to Joe Biden. If there was something like that, that will turn off a huge section of the population that already has an inclination away um, from Ukraine anyway. And it could be Hunter Biden that was the key link that caused the US not to really supply or help Ukraine when they should. Now, separate, even if there was corruption there, and I don't know that there was. So I'm not saying that there was, and I'm not doing a Tucker Carlson kind of thing. We don't know, but we should ask. The facts should come out over time. I'm not worried about that. Even if there was that, we should still support Ukraine, because supporting Ukraine from the terrorism of their neighbor state, Russia, is the right thing to do. So I'm not trying to tar anybody. I'm just saying, like, it's not a good look, and it's very cynical if the Republicans are just doing that just to tar Biden. That's a terrible thing if they're doing that. But I don't know if they're doing that or if there was something or anything along those lines. Okay, I'm going to get to your questions now, but we just have to try to expand and think about these things first before we say, well, he did it or he didn't do it or whatever it is. We just need to try to take a step back and think, what would be the right thing? And if it wasn't my guy, or if it was my guy, that's secondary to what the it is. Okay. With that being said, hello from all these people here. Hello. Money out of politics. Hi from Melbourne. Greetings. As long as corporate lobbying is the legal money. Okay, so if you have questions about Ukraine, let's stay with questions about Ukraine. Ask them. We can talk about the dam. We can talk about Russian propaganda. We can talk about theories about the dam. We can talk about counteroffensive. We can talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about related to Ukraine. I don't know more about either the Trump indictment, because I only watched a little bit yesterday just before I shift gears to watch a movie with my wife, and I don't know much more about Burisma. But what I did see was just enough to intelligently raise the question of, hey, what if we took the step back? And so I'm not going to comment on those anymore. Okay. All right. So, hello, Professor. Greetings from Germany. Hello. Corruption and politics go hand in hand. Come on. Questions about Ukraine, not about corruption in the US. There are very few corrupt politicians. Take out all lobbying from politics and make it a crime with very long jail sentences. Right. So, all I was saying with that, and this is the last thing that I want to talk about with this. Put your questions about Ukraine here now. Um, is if you're going to apply it fairly. So there's two ways that you could apply this and it would be fair. The unfair way is to attack one guy and not go after the other or the other side, right? The fair way is to either prosecute both sides or say, you know what, at this level you have such clearance that we trust you with your those documents and we trust you with those documents even though you didn't do it, and we probably ought to slap you on the wrist and say don't do that. We're going to leave both alone. But if you go after one side as opposed to the other, now you've inflamed that side who's not going to hear anything that you have to say. Okay, I'm done. I'm over with the US politic kind of stuff. Let's talk about Ukraine. So the dam broke. um, and yesterday I talked about that, so YouTube is a funny thing. I still don't understand. Oh, by the way, I did pass 10,000 and I wasn't complaining about how I can't get there. I just don't understand it. So yesterday I posted just in my car. I was thinking about the counteroffensive and I had some downtime. I was in a parking lot of a fast food place waiting. And so I just shot a little video on my iPhone and then I posted it. I didn't put any elaborate title and it did great. Like it was just my face. It had no elaborate thumbnail and all the things that you're supposed to have. And I'm thinking, like, how I spend all this time trying to do it right on some things and they flop, and then I do something that's so terrible and it went great. So I wasn't complaining about I can't get to 10,000, and I just passed it. When I woke up this morning, it looked like 10,011. So thank you to all of you who really sincerely care about Ukraine, and for however many trolls are out there now, because I've attracted a bunch of trolls for some reason. However many of you trolls made me a micro influencer. I think that's the term once you pass 10,000. Again, YouTube is new to me. Uh, so, but again, what I was saying was I don't understand YouTube enough to make it work right. Like uh, it's like a machine that I don't know exactly where the levers, which this lever does that or that lever does this, and I'm kind of going going like that. Um, so, and I was also saying I'm just so tired. And somebody was saying like, well, stop doing the propaganda ones where you're evaluating them. No, it's not tired from that. The dam really was mentally taxing. Like to realize the destruction and pain and whatever that was just devastating that population unnecessarily. So um, that really it it impacted me greater than I thought. Okay, so let's talk about your comments here. The live stream was I don't know. You're talking to somebody else. Russia will have to pay compensation to Ukraine. How will this be done? So Russia is a John McCain famously said a gas station masquerading as a nation. So they have plenty of oil and gas, mineral wealth that they could pay that off. It's a third of their budget, and so they could be using that to pay for that for a long time without doing a World War One scenario where it leads to World War Two. They could work that out in such a way, but Russia will need to pay compensation on the backside of this, and I believe it could be done pretty easily. Paul says, how involved will the West be in reforming the Ukrainian government after the war? It would depend. And I get that question every so often. That all depends on how much or how the war ends. If they just hightail it and run out right now, not a lot. If they are soundly defeated and they have to, now in either scenario, they should have to, before they can become part of the family of nations again, they need to make reparations and make things right, to be admitted back into the world order. I don't see any appetite to do that until they are so soundly defeated that there has to be some changes. And it has to be like changes after Germany or Japan after World War II, that kind of thing. And I think they'll be on the point of collapse before we get to that kind of place. I don't mean internal revolt, but I mean oligarchs maybe threatening Putin or having to take military leaders or something have to take power and make some substantial changes with international inspections and things along those lines. Um, next question. I heard Western. Where am I? Oh, so there's a bunch of questions now. Um, Lobbying's not. I heard the Western countries are very unhappy about the recent news from Ukraine. Is the support for Ukraine in danger now? I don't know where you heard that, because that's what RT is saying, but I haven't seen that in Western media. Do you think it's wise from Ukraine to keep completely silent about the counteroffensive and let Russian propaganda fill the information void? It's a better thing than um, tipping your hand, I think, for temporarily. But I don't know that. Like what's their alternative, right? Say no, 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 we're fighting here and we're fighting there. No, because then you lose some of that surprise or some of that element that you need in order to. So I would put lives over the propaganda in the short term. Take the money out of. Okay, Paul says having trolls is a badge of honor, means you're doing something right. Well, I'm doing something right if that's the case. At Reddick, the West and EU is in full support and not influenced by an incident. Safe soil. Ryan Macbeth was saying, "Oh, this is a good one, I think." Ryan Macbeth was saying it could possibly have been Russian lack of proper maintenance on the dam, just naturally made it fall apart. Okay, there's a couple things about that. One, Norway. I think it was Norway had some seismic. They track seismic things around the world, and they sensed an explosion just before the dam broke. Satellite images also caught some kind of explosion just before the dam broke. Um, this is just what I've read in Western press. Now, let's say that that wasn't the case. Russia is still responsible because they controlled it, and it wouldn't have happened had they not been controlling it. But I don't believe that that's what it was. And Ryan Macbeth's a smart guy. I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but um, yeah, that's how I perceive things. And I could be wrong. I'm just explaining what I have seen. Let's see. Good morning, Professor. How will we know the counteroffensive is successful? Will it be when the Russian army leaves all the regions of Ukraine? Yes. I mean, and that's not going to be just because of this counteroffensive. I think they'll take some ground, but I don't think they'll push them all the way out in this unless they just do remarkably well. But I wouldn't. So I wouldn't raise that kind of expectation. I think they'll make some progress, but not complete progress because I mean, this is a hard thing. Generally, when people go to war, they're like, yeah, we'll be home by Christmas or whatever. And, 4 years later, you might be home by Christmas. So it takes a long time sometimes. So, but we'll see about what progress they've made and that kind of thing shortly. Uh, right now, we're in this information blackout. What you can do is read Russian media and invert it, and that's a really interesting way to understand. Excuse me. What you can do is read Russian media and invert it because they very often say what their opponents are doing. They criticize what they're doing is what their opponents are doing. And so if they're saying 10-1, I wouldn't believe that, but I would say, I wonder why they're so forcefully saying that. And that's not 100% accurate, but as a rule of thumb, that's how they act. I don't know why they do it that way, but they tend to do it that way. Ozzy says, when I first saw footage of the dam burst, I honestly thought it was AI generated. Despite, yeah, I mean, it's hard to wrap your mind around, Ozzy. I understand. Um, Richie MC says, why is Victoria Newland the proverbial boogeyman for pro Putin, pro Russia American YouTubers? Because she said some comments that could be taken in a way that makes it look like the US was behind the destruction of Ukraine by drawing them away from Mother Russia. And you can go back and see some of those comments. And yeah, I understand how they could do that, but that's part of it. I meant the recently destroyed tanks, the mouse that roared. Yeah, I've thought about the mouse that roared. If you're not familiar with the book, a number of times. Uh, yeah, it doesn't quite fit, but there's something interesting about it. Um, because they also try to show we're the superpower of the world. So it's not exactly that, but I've thought about that many times. Um, Let's see. Sorry about the typo. Yeah, no worries. Professor Gerdes, as far as, man, my thing, as far as the politics of our country, it has been very corrupt and appears to not support freedom any longer. Are you talking about the U.S.? Are you talking about when you say our country? Are you talking? I don't know where you're from, so we'd have to talk about that. But there is a ton of infighting, and we're not being civil to each other, and we need to get back to having some kind of civil discourse rather than "you guys are evil," "you no, you're evil," "no, you're evil." I mean, that's not helping anyone. We can find common ground. Look, I'm a conservative. I tell you, I'm a conservative, but I can find unity with a lot of. It's not lost on me that most of my audience are on the left side of the spectrum, which is the funniest thing to my mind. But we can find unity because this is an important topic when we're dealing with Ukraine. Um, okay. Let's see. Aussie Mocha says, we heard a lot about OPSEC being carried out by Ukraine. Is there OPSEC being carried out by the Russians? I don't know, but when I read things like Wagner boss Prigozhin talking about how it's science fiction that the Russians have made these kind of gains, um, I don't know. I wouldn't think so. The Russians they just tend to lie in their propaganda and to show how tough and strong they are, and that's by design. And so it's hard to believe whatever they're saying. So I don't think so. And we also have satellites that are tracking very faithfully the movements and things along those lines. The Russians certainly have satellites and are trying to do that too, but we're trying yeah, the Ukrainians are trying to tamp and minimize the spread of where they are right at the moment. Um, I don't know about the Russians. Question: the millions of young, mostly female and child refugees out of the country, and many young of this generation killed in the war. How do you see the demographic future of Ukraine? Yeah, and so that depends on how long the war goes, how many are killed, that kind of thing. But remember, I mean, you're talking about okay, so let's say we're talking about just using round numbers 200,000 Ukrainians killed, males killed out of a population of 40,000, 40 million or so. That's, I mean, that's okay. So 40 million, and then you half that, 20 million are male, and then you roughly half that, and you get into the, breeding population, 10 million. It's not good, but it's not crushing. It's a bad thing all the way around, no doubt. But it's not like there's no Ukraine anymore because they've all been killed. It's not, and you have the women and children, women raising the children that are. So it's bad, but it's not as genocidal as the Russians have tried to make it yet. And I say yet because it depends on how long everything goes, how bad it will be. So I was just using round numbers. I was not saying that that's the figure because we don't really know what the figure is. Professor, do I think Russia ever embrace democracy? Can you speculate what will happen after the war? So they have no history of democracy, but neither did Japan, right? So it depends on how they're crushed during the war. If they are really pushed to the place where they have to make changes, then they can revive like Japan has, where Japan really had no democratic or not a significant democratic experience, and neither has Russia. They're pretty similar in that regard. Um, okay. Why is the dam being blown up portrayed as being such a horrible event by Russia, but almost nobody complained when Ukraine blew up a dam? That's a great question, Drew. Ukraine blew up a dam. Starsky showed the footage of the dam and the water, and he drove over it, and it was like a river and it flood basin, and it wasn't great, but it stymied the Russian army from taking the capital, and it was on a much smaller scale than what this is. This has just it's many times in scale, and so there's a substantial difference between them doing it to prevent them on a smaller scale and the Russians doing it right now on it with like 80 settlements potentially being affected. It's a bad thing. I mean, it's so, but that's a legitimate question to be asking, and that's a question the other side is asking as well. Ukraine admitted blowing up the dam when they did it. No civilians died. That's a difference. Yeah, that's a good answer. Dennis Davdov said Ukraine should be open with info, especially on their success, instead of keeping it silent. Yes, soon enough, but in the immediate phase, not necessarily. Ozzy said footage of the small dam that made a river run a little faster compared to this. So, yeah. Drew, even if they did, obviously did not cause mass loss of life, animals, ruin the environment around, things along those lines. Do I think Dennis is correct when he said he should explain the public instead of keeping silent? No, I don't. I think that we should just wait. Will India's leader Modi change his mind on the invitation, possibly with coaxing from the United States? I don't know what Modi will do. Modi's been a wild card through this. Okay, Ukraine blew up a dam on the outskirts of Kyiv. We know that. Save soil. Is Elon Musk still footing the bill for satellite coverage with Starlink? No, he is not. The U.S. government put out something earlier this week that said that they are now picking up that tab. The Polish channel PTV have good news coverage. Aussie Mocha, yes, they did, but in comparison, they didn't have risk like this dam, and also Russians are an advancing backward. Okay, people need to get past politics and look at the humanity. That's a great comment, because like, look at how many people are just devastated by this, and it's some brutality there. And then the propaganda, like, it's funny, like, we don't coordinate, like Jake and Vlad and Anders and Anna and people like me, and we don't coordinate, but we were all on the same thing of debunking the Russian lies of this, which was, it was just so, like, I don't know, it's so evil. I mean, I don't know how to say it any better than that. It was really an evil thing for them to do that and then say Ukraine did it. And if they can do that about this, they could say that about Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and that's my great fear. I don't know that I wouldn't predict that they're going to, but it's still kind of a possibility. And I don't see any scenario where they'll use missiles with nuclear weapons. I don't see a tactical nuclear weapon, but there was some kind of explosion there, and Ukraine was shelling, is what the kind of thing that I could see them saying. Okay, we're about a half hour in. Let me get your last few questions, because I try not to do these live chats too long. Found Dennis to be quite depressed lately. I hope he's personally okay. Yeah, we're all a bit depressed lately. I mean, this has been some significant, like, it's just hard to process. Russian state TV is like Goebbels on steroids. I read Goebbels' diaries, by the way, when I was doing my master's thesis on the Third Reich, and like, you see a lot of eerie parallels between what Goebbels was doing, or how he was doing things, and what the Russians do. It's really some interesting stuff. Um, let's see. I just want to hug him. I think you're talking about Dennis Davdov, and calm him down. When should we expect the word on the U.S. approval of the 41 F-18 jets that Aussies are contemplating? I don't know what's going to happen with that. And I thought we were talking just about F-16s, but I don't know. That's a good question. Infographics has a nice piece on U.S. versus Russia in Ukraine. I have to look at that. Tyler says, do I accept that there is a lot of propaganda coming from the Ukraine side also? So, Tyler, it depends on what you mean by propaganda. There's two definitions of propaganda. One is telling lies, and the other is telling your side of the story. So if you're talking about your side of the story, that's one thing. So if you could clarify, I'd like to hear what you mean. If you're talking about just other lies, that's a different thing. So if you could clarify that, that would be good. Potato Gunman says the danger is if Russia is trying a limited local nuclear disaster, what could go wrong? Yeah, it could spread very big and very bad. And yeah, I think that's what worries me. Outside of gravity belief is the strongest force in. I'm not sure what that meant. Hi, Professor. Have I seen Ryan Macbeth video? I know what you're talking about. I'm not sure that I'm with him, although I wouldn't rule it out. It is a possibility, but there are other factors, like the explosion picked up seismically and on satellite. Do I plan to visit Ukraine after the war? I feel obligated since I've invested so much time. I would love to after the war. Rain Dog says, we Germans didn't have any practice in democracy either, but after the war was lost, we really wanted to change something and it can really work. And we're now super Democrats. That's right. So they had a limited experience of democracy before the war. It's somewhat analogous to the Russian 30-year experience. They did. And so, but Hitler in the Enabling Act eliminated half of the American Bill of Rights in one stroke. Right now, we have that as you would have to have amendments to the Constitution, which is a very high bar in order to remove those kind of things. He could do it in just one simple piece of legislation. This was after the Reichstag fire, where he blamed communists, and that gave him power in order to do whatever he wanted to do in a swifter way. By the way, if you think the American system is jacked up, it's really not. It's designed for gridlock. It's designed not to function very fast, to protect one group from being able to oppress another group. My doctoral dissertation was on the leadership assumptions of American statesmen during the Constitutional Convention and ratification debates. I know what I'm talking about. I read all the debates in about the ratification in the Continental Congress, or not the Constitutional Convention, and each state's ratification convention. So it's designed for gridlock. It's not supposed to work well. It's designed to not work well, to slow it down. Scott Ritter is on the Russian payroll, somebody says a number of times. Okay, perhaps he is. But I believe he's also a true believer, even if he is on the Russian payroll. My country do not go deep in world history in our high schools, so it's easy for Malaysian to get stuck in Russian propaganda. Yeah, and it's easy because RT will then say, sure, Asian paper or Islamic paper or Indian paper, cut and paste this article that we already created, and you can use it. And you see it, like I've cut and pasted a RT article, popped it into Google, and saw the exact same thing in Islamic, Asian, Indian newspapers, right? So it was pretty interesting how that works. I volunteer at an animal shelter. If you know of a program that gets Ukrainian dogs or cats to the U.S. for free, let me know. Huh, that's interesting. Okay. That's the last comment that I see here. So if you have any final comments, or you just have to get off your chest and ask questions, happy to do it. Otherwise, we'll call it here at just over a half hour, which is pretty good. I like to keep the live streams a little bit shorter because while I want to answer your questions, people will watch it if it's shorter. If it's really long, maybe they're not as interested in watching it. So let's see. Anybody else have anything about Ukraine, the dam, the propaganda, the counteroffensive, anything along those lines? Wagner, opinion of USA history textbook, Howard Zinn. I think it's terrible. I think he is extremely one-sided and does not provide any balance to it, because he's trying, and he tells you he's trying to only see it through this way. It's a people's history, which is basically through a socialist lens or a communist leaning kind of lens, and it only provides things through that. And it's the opposite of what I tell you to do, which is triangulate on facts. I think you should read that too. And in addition, you should read, now you're going to hate this, A Patriot's History of the United States, which is a very conservative view of the same thing. Now, you read a regular textbook, you read Zinn's book, and you read that book, and then you have a very different view of the whole thing. And you can, have mental arguments in your head between the Patriot's History reader and Zinn about who's right and who's wrong with that. So, okay. But again, I'm just saying the same thing I've always said, which is triangulate on the facts. Okay, we just talked about that. How can a stream have only 169 viewers? I don't know. What do I know about YouTube? If you know anything about YouTube, or you can steer me to how I can know better about YouTube, I would really appreciate it, because I don't know. Vlad Vexler's commentary on Putin's speech was great. It was. I saw that. You're doing a good job. Thank you. What do I think about Polish volunteers attacking Russian soil with Russian Freedom Legion? I'm like Jake. I'm not sure what I think about that, because that seems like it's a very dangerous thing. to allow Russia to then have a pretext to escalate. But I don't know. They're volunteers. They're not from they're Polish, but they're not like from the Polish government, and it's not like the Polish government can corral them necessarily. Um, Outside of gravity, belief is the strongest force in the universe. That's why propaganda is so dangerous. Okay. Thank you for doing an amazing job. You're one of the few channels I watch in full screen. Well, thank you. Uh, Abi Ozzy said, no fly zone. Where to go? No fly zone by NATO west of the Dnieper. I don't know that NATO wants to get involved in having their pilots over there, but again, they're trying to be careful. But again, Putin has done a masterful job of deterring the West, and I hate to say that, but that's actually what's happened. Someone who served in the British Royal Tank Regiment, I can tell you how that convoy was constructed and moving against anything they would have learned. Okay. Ever thought of getting on the radio? So informative. I know less about the radio than I do about YouTube, and I'm kind of an idiot about YouTube. Ukraine is very disappointed in UN, and rightly so. I understand that sentiment. Would Tucker Carlson be held responsible for spreading Ukrainophobia? Well, interestingly enough, he looks like Tucker might be getting sued for violating his Fox agreement by going overtime on his YouTube, and his overtime was talking about aliens. Okay. Weird. You can't make this stuff up. Wall Street Journal just did an excellent documentary on Wagner PMC. I'm going to have to look for that. Haven't heard a lot about Switchblade suicide drones. What has happened to them? So there's an interesting article I just saw this past week about Ukrainian has an internal drone program now. It was on a CNN article, I believe. You can look that up, and they're working on creating their own drones. Drones are really interesting because they're a very cost-effective way of wreaking a lot of damage. Should Hungary be removed from NATO? That would not be easy. And Orban has been the fly in the ointment. Thank you for recommending reading Patriots History. You're welcome. The news will be mixed, but get better in time. Yep. Did you? Whoops. I just missed something. Wow, there's a lot of comments that just showed up here. That I miss celebrating? Did I miss you celebrating 10,000? I did mention that. We just passed that, and again, I have no idea how we did that. Like, so sometimes I put out a video. I'm like, wow, this is like the best video I've ever done. I'm like so excited. I'm pumped. This is going to be great, and it flops, and I'm like, come on, people! I worked on this for like 5 hours. Like, what? And it, but it's what the audience likes. I just don't understand. And there's a lot of work that goes into this. Haven't heard a lot about Switchblade suicide. We already talked about that. Putin's outside sources feeling Poland is itching for a fight. Yeah, you're probably right, but we probably don't want to do that if we can avoid it. We want to tamp it down where it is and not let it spill over other borders. If your streams are at a regular schedule and time, the algorithm likes it. Yes, I'm still trying to work out that regular time. My grandparents had to flee Ukraine in 1912. History repeats itself. Yeah, my grandparents fled from Germany, ironically from the communists, not from the fascists in Germany. Can't the West not use the dam to their benefit and basically tell the global South, especially Africa, that we care about nature and want to help? Well, the West is going to have to explain when they can prove conclusively that Russia blew the dam, that the food stuff that's not coming is a consequence of Russia blowing that dam, because this was the breadbasket of the breadbasket where this happened, and it's now wiped out. So it's going to decrease the food supplies from Ukraine significantly. Does Russia have unrestricted YouTube access? I'm not sure. That's a good question. I'm not sure what they have unrestricted anymore. I don't think that they do have unrestricted YouTube access. I could be wrong about that, though. I think they have Facebook unrestricted still, or something. I don't remember what it was, but they've tamped down on a lot of social media. I've heard a lot about switchblades. Okay, we talked about that already. Low just dropped in. Thanks for your work about the dam with water pressure on Da. You do not need a lot of TNT to make it crack and let the pressure do the work, perhaps, but you can't do it from the outside, from what I understand. Unfortunately, we need to use some of the money on Ukraine. Please stand with us so this war can end. Use the money on improving the environment instead of repairs. Do I think it's a good move for the Ukraine to be silent about leaving Russia defining the narrative? Somebody already asked that, and I think in the short term, yes. Everyone hit the like button to share the stream. Thank you. I would appreciate that if you would do that. There's 97, but there's 182 of you here. So if you could do that, that would help. Likes move the algorithm, it seems. Glory to Ukraine. It would be easier and more constructive to remove Orban from Hungary. Well, that's not an easy thing to do. The more we hit the like button, the share stream will get out there more. Why are there lots of conservatives not more supportive of Ukraine? How come they don't see kinship with the Ukrainian people? Okay, so you're confusing conservatives with Republicans. So within the Republican Party, there are conservatives and there are populists and there are a few libertarians, right? It's the populists that are the ones that are most in for Trump, that are isolationist in nature. The conservatives, like me, Reagan conservatives, are the ones that are most supportive of you. Go back about a month and actually go down into my playlist and you'll see American politics, and there are a few episodes where I talk about that kind of thing. NATO in this war. Let's see. Greta Thunberg finally posted a response. Puppet masters allayed. Isn't it possible to win a nuclear war now? Even this Patriot system can shoot down hypersonic missiles. You don't want to get that one wrong. So I hope to never get to that point. I like the Polish engagement in Ukraine, but the EU, the Poles are not very often on Viktor Orban's side, and they have an EU case on their hands, and uncomfortable judges can be dismissed by the government. Like. Thank you. Barnes Wallace Blue Dams with pleasure. Just trying to follow up. You asked for my clarification. I'm not sure what we're talking about there. Anyone in LSA, we need to plug this stream during our stream with permission. LSA. I don't know what we're talking about here. And exactly, you see shape chart. Okay, well, we're not asking me questions. Okay, so we're talking at each other. But we're at about 41 minutes now. So thank you for your time. And I appreciate your interest and how much you guys care about Ukraine. And if you have other questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. And I do read all the comments, although I don't answer everything. All right. Thank you all. I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.